Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. 22% of Obamacare enrollees dropped their coverage this year. You're not going to hear that on the nightly news. Robots are taking over for workers as the deindustrialization of America continues. But first, the World Bank's chief economist warns the Fed not to raise interest rates just yet. What do you make of that? I mean, at some point, you can't go with 0% interest money in perpetuity, can you?
I think the Federal Reserve Board is in betwixt and between as far as when to get started. You know, you're only talking about 0.25%.
At first.
Yes. The point is, you know, it isn't the amount, it's a minimal amount, but once you do it, you know what's coming behind it. I just wrote a basic column about that, and I predicted that when in a year after we break the ice and get back on the 0.25%, you will have a full percent within less than a year. And to match it to the various economics as far as the values. You see, the one thing that Janet Yellen, chair of the Federal Reserve Board, is very much afraid of right now. She's very shaky because of what's happening in China, which has gone way down in imports and exports. And they're nervous, and they don't want to be found guilty of facilitating a real breakdown in the markets. They feel that if they came out in September, and as we speak here, this show will be seen in September, I would say that as we speak, there is a strong chance they will not do anything in the month of September.
So then you're looking at December.
Probably the earliest would be December, because every time I think they were ready to move, some world event comes along and economically debilitates that kind of action. And when the chief of the World Bank sends a message to Yellen and saying, please don't start the interest rate move now, because everybody's watching the United States. And even if you only move a quarter, that means you're on the path of further increases down the way.
You open the door.
You open the door, and this is going to cause a fierce reaction, because it shows that the dollar, which already is a dominant currency in the world, will be even stronger. And the leverage that the United States has, not from the standpoint of exports because their products will be more expensive, but from the standpoint of power in culminating deals all over just about 80% of all basic major deals that are made in the world are monetized in the American currency.
Now, when you look at a lot of the larger corporations that have been getting cheap money for a long time, that would start to put a little bit of a stop or a break on some of that going on as well, would it not?
I don't know if what is happening right now, and you mentioned deindustrialization, which is a very good word of what's really happening. It's just the beginning. When you mentioned about the robots, that's coming down the path. It's just, you were projecting into the future, but it's happening, which means there'll be less people having jobs. There'll be like 4 to 1. 4 jobs today will be 1 job. Maybe 10, 15 years.
I just read a report where 3 robots can replace 60 welders.
It could be. Could be. But the point is,
you look at auto manufacturing,
the ratio of machinery to people will be getting bigger and bigger and bigger, with less and less people involved.
Which doesn't bode well for the economy of the middle class. It doesn't bode well for anybody that's at that.
You know, I found
class.
A very interesting statistic. Going back to 2007, that was before the outbreak of the great financial recession, the electrical usage at that time was greater than that which is used today. Now, electricity is used commercially, industrially, residentially, but the very point that much of the downturn in the use of electricity has been in the manufacturing sector. And this has been based on the
and that's with an increase in population as well.
There are 20 million more people that could be working than were potentially working in 2007. We had a much greater utilization of people in 2007, even though this phony, I call it a phony unemployment rate
Oh,
being 5
absolutely.
point. Well, that is only the big corporations using people full time. Labor force participation is the real number, and we're down at about 62%. We're bumping along right at the bottom, almost at recession level standards.
And I just saw a report where I think 400,000 jobs were taken by foreign workers in the past 5 years versus 200,000 for native born. So the trend continues against the American worker as well.
Well, also, your big corporations can move. The one thing, two come to my mind. Ford Motor Company decided to move down to Mexico. Nabisco decided to move down to Mexico. Why? Mexico's next door. I give Mexico credit for work standards today that are much better than they used to be, and they have a tremendous advantage of being next door, so people that are ordering goods don't have to wait that long. They also know that the Mexicans allow what's called maquiladoras. These are segments in Mexico where they pay there's no import taxes of any type, no tariffs or nothing. So it's like having an American colony right down in Mexico. And Mexico has been very amenable to this happening.
And we have one of the highest corporate income taxes in the world, which is why a lot of companies are leaving.
Absolutely. Now you can say, well, you can write off things, but we're not any better than most industrial countries today in what we can write off. So you're right. I mean, with 35% is very high compared to other industrial countries.
And I have people say that to me all the time too. They say, well, if you're in business and you do this or do that, you can write it off. And I say, yeah, but I'd rather have the money. I'd rather have the cash than the write-off. You know what I mean?
Well,
I understand that tax-wise.
Yeah, they say, well, you can, like when they used to have a 90% tax rate for the top 2% or whatever, back in the 60s, and then it was actually until Reagan came in and changed. But then you could write anything off against wages. If you were head of a company and you were making $10 million a year, and the highest rate would be 90%. However, that could be whatever you wrote off, whether it was expenses for a trip or entertainment or whatever, you could write it off against salaries and wages. You can't do that today.
We need to take a quick break, but we'll be back faster than an Iranian centrifuge spins. You can follow Maury on Twitter now at mbeshlos. Our stat of the day: U.S. government employees outnumber manufacturing employees 1.8